Yeah, that's a fair point. Don't say anything in the chat, or no, say things in chat. But if you want it minuted, please try and speak it out loud. And if someone doesn't have a microphone and you see someone saying something important in the chat, try and just read it out just for the sake of the minutes, because it is functionally impossible to keep track of both at the same time. It's definitely impossible to minute both at the same time. So are there any objections to the minutes? I'm trying to find the minutes myself. Nope. We'll consider them approved then. Are there any matters arising from the minutes? Secretary, matters arising?
There was one actionable, so I suppose you could consider that
Yeah, that's a matter arising. What's the
matter arising? And it was for yourself and the president to investigate a way for students to sort of facilitate information sharing about students who had been on internships and those who were applying.
For summer internships?
Yes.
That is an actionable. I entirely forgot about it, so apologies, Faculty Assembly. I'll write that down on a sticky note right now. So, internships. So I'll report back to you on that. So next Faculty Assembly. I do have some internship related information, but it's not related to that. So apologies for that. Is the president here at the moment? He is not. I think the president might be jumping in later, so might have a chance to ask him. Okay, so we'll consider that matter arising deferred. Sorry, everyone. I just did not write that down, apparently. So we'll consider that a matter, an actionable from this meeting to actually do that. Okay, so first order of proper agenda is the update from me. I have a few things on my report for this assembly. So first thing is the Hamilton student space. So I did have some detailed information to give you about this, but I was told 5 minutes ago that I'm actually not allowed to tell you about it. I can say that there are updates, that the project is moving along nicely. So anyone who is going to be in the STEM faculty come September, you will have, you'll find out nice things. I'm just apparently not allowed to tell you what those nice things are. But that is being progressing. Myself and the president have been working on that, and we've been making progress. Schedule 1 revamp. Okay, so this is a little bit of housekeeping. So I'm not sure if this link was sent to you. I'm going to throw it into the chat. Copy this chat. So Schedule 1 is the bit of the Constitution that deals with how many reps there are per class. And I've been helping with this. And the reason I'm mentioning it isn't to show off. It's because there's questions that I could do with your input on. Because as like it was kind of mentioned there, internships. So we have a weird thing in STEM that's different than other faculties in that we have 2 courses that I know of, and if there's more, let me know. That'd be engineering and computer science, where there are points in the year where a good portion of the class are out on internship as part of their course. So for the second half of the year of 4th year in engineering, most of the class isn't in the college anymore. And then that raises an interesting problem when it comes to representation. And it's happened 2 years in a row. I know in some streams in engineering where the class rep has gone out on internship, and then the people still in class have no rep because the class rep is, you know, not in college. And there's no real clean way to deal with this in the current structure. But the good thing about Schedule 1 is that Schedule 1 is actually quite flexible and it can be changed to deal with this. But I and the education officer haven't had an idea of how to cleanly deal with this, so I thought I'd put this to the floor and see if you guys have any suggestions for how you might. Actually, first of all, are there any other courses? I'm missing any out? Is it just computer science and engineering? Schedule 1 is not updated at the moment, but it will be once those courses are courses. So all the conveners have access to this spreadsheet, and they can comment on it and say where there's issues, and none of us done anything yet. Okay, so there's no suggestions for how we might deal with reps going out an internship? Oh, Mary has her hand up. Yes.
I'm a CSL class rep, third year. I'm just wondering, would this kind of come under, would third year CSL, like normally under normal circumstances, kind of come under the same thing? Because we'd normally be on Erasmus. Like it wouldn't be exactly the same, but like we wouldn't be in college and we'd be all over the place.
Yeah, so it's a similar concept. So if we can come up with a way of dealing with internships, we'll also come up with dealing with Erasmus. But CSL is a bit different in the entire. That's a mandatory Erasmus, isn't it? There's no option to stay in Ireland.
No, not until this year. This is the first year where we had the option to stay in Ireland. So CSL in third year are normally on Erasmus, so they are out of college. So that would be like we'd be gone.
Yeah, and that means you end up with class reps are potentially not in the country, but that's a bit different because you're all kind of in different universities.
Yeah.
And then the assumption is that the TCSU is not going to be the most qualified to deal with issues in other universities. There's going to be issues with like linking between, which would a slightly different problem, but not a really class rep. Like that's a bit of a bigger problem they'd be putting onto a class rep.
Yeah, just thought I'd hear.
Would internship Erasmus for one semester or for the year? So in CS and engineering, it's for one semester, and Erasmus, I believe, is for the full year. And CSL. Okay, well, there's no other suggestions. We shall crack on, but that's something that I've been working on. So if anyone wants to give me ideas for how I can work on that better, reach out to me. All right, this is another big piece of work that I've been on. You've all been sent this. Some of you have been sent this by school, quite lovingly. The big survey, because someone let me name it for some reason. So this is happening. This has been a good chunk of my work for the last while. So this obviously is following on from the mid-semester review from last semester, and the idea is we're asking a lot of the same questions, trying to see if there's trends and if things are getting better or getting worse and stuff like that. So I encourage you all to try and share that with your classes and get as many responses as you can, because we wanted to do this as a mid-semester review, but then just various things got in the way. The data is still going to be useful, just not in the same way. So a suggestion from Krishy there back on the previous point was, could the current class rep elect a temp class rep to take their position while they're gone for internship? Do you mean whoever the class rep is that went on internship could like appoint like a co-opting? Or do you mean the class would elect another rep, like there would be a full other election? I'm not entirely sure what the suggestion is. The class rep selects someone. It's an idea, yeah? The only issue is I'm pretty sure class reps have to be elected, so co-opting like that probably would cause constitutional issues. But the constitution is under review at the moment, so I'd like a deputy class rep. That'd be funny. Yeah, okay. I like that idea, but the co-opting is interesting. It would require a constitutional change, but as I said, the constitution is under review at the moment. So that might be
If the rep resigned, though, couldn't the person who is essentially being co-opted to that position just get it by applying by email?
that is a way to get around the wording constitution. Yeah,
So
it's a bit
they
of
could do it that way.
oh yeah, like it's possible. It'd be messy, but it's definitely possible. Could have someone not doing the internship run for a rep? I mean, that is the cleanest way. Like the cleanest way is just if the rep doesn't leave the college, but we need the problem is that it's happened a few times where the rep has gone on internship and we don't have a systemic way of dealing with that. Like my own rep when I was in 4th year, he went on internship and he continued being an amazing rep. But I imagine a lot of reps, once they're out of the college, they don't really maintain a connection in the same way. Niall was just very good at his job. Candidates left over for usual vote could be appointed. That's a suggestion from Sophie Gray, JF Biomed class rep. Yeah, these are all good suggestions. Okay, well, I will assume that suggestions keep going chat and I shall push on with this and hopefully we can get out of here in like under an hour or under an hour and a half maximum, depending on how long the last item is. Unpaid internships. Okay, so this is another work package that I've put on myself for some reason. It arose from a conversation with one of the provostial candidates, one of the unsuccessful provostial candidates. We were having a conversation, myself and the Sabbats, with this candidate, and I asked her, would she support a college policy where these internships for credit would be required to have pay, because so people are kind of left to, in most departments, it is kind of changed depending on the department, but some departments help students find an internship that pays them money, and some departments the students are kind of left to fend for themselves, and it ends up with students doing unpaid internships and their arguments for and against unpaid internships, the ethics of unpaid internships. It's my personal view that they are detrimental to students because they're very beneficial. Doing an unpaid internship is very beneficial in non-monetary ways. And because they're so beneficial, students are being effectively forced into taking this unpaid work. Because there's benefits to them that are too great. And then you end up with students in precarious financial positions. And I think that's bad for student well-being. So I was just kind of pitching this idea. And she said, no, she would not, because she thinks that they're too beneficial, and because it would cause problems with accreditation, which was incorrect. Because I looked up the accreditation guidelines before asking the question, and even after pointing out to her that no, it didn't actually conflict with professional accreditation, she still held through on no, I would not support a policy. So I thought that was interesting that this provostial candidate would not support it and quite firmly refused to support it. So that's why one of the motions that were at council that got deferred was myself and the SCSS convener trying to get a mandate, because as I said, it's just my personal view on these unpaid internships. So I was bringing a motion to council to get a mandate for this to actually be worked on. So that's been a little bit of work I was doing. So that required sort of some researching into, there's a thing coming specifically about accreditation, so I had to kind of look into that and see how that would affect everything. As far as I can tell, the president has joined the chat. Yeah, so that work package involved me kind of looking up these accreditation guidelines and figuring out how would this unpaid internship ban on a college level impact professional accreditation with like Engineers Ireland or the IOP, or I think that's the only two that really apply in STEM, and it doesn't impact them. So there's no real reason the college couldn't ban unpaid internship other than them not wanting to. So there's no real there's no real reason for them to ban it. And if they were banned, it would mean the students would never be forced into unpaid internships. And on a broader scale, I also put in the motion for it to be lobbied to ban them nationally. A couple of countries, Canada, for example, just it's illegal to have unpaid interns, and that just makes sense to me. So that was a bit of work I was doing. Update. Yes. So I wanted to throw this in just to say to people that final council is coming, final faculty assembly is coming, and there's different positions that are being elected, and I want to take an opportunity to make sure people know who gets elected where and what the different positions are, because there's a little bit of confusion every year about who gets elected where. So I am the faculty convener. So I sit on Union Forum and I chair this. I do not get elected at faculty assembly though. I get elected at council, or rather my successor will get elected at council. That's final council that's happening on the 27th of April, I believe. The deputy STEM convener, who is Ms. Bevan, gets elected at faculty assembly, as well as all the school conveners and the program conveners. So for all the schools, and then also for TR 060 and the science program convener. The science program convener is not a standalone position. The science program convener has to be a school or program convener. So you can't just run to be the science program convener. You have to already be, for example, the chemistry convener, like Thomas is now, and then you can also be the science convener. You can't just be the science convener. Bev this year is the TR 060 convener and the deputy STEM convener, but you don't have to be a school convener to also be deputy STEM convener. That's just how it happened this year, but that's not a requirement. You can just run to be deputy STEM convener, and with being deputy STEM convener comes being chair of diversity in STEM. So being deputy it used to just be, you basically just took minutes at faculty assembly. It is now a full job. You run a campaign. So if you're interested in getting involved in running diversity in STEM, that is the position you want to run for. The faculty convener, by design, has very little influence on diversity in STEM. The faculty convener is basically a non-voting secretary. Their purpose is basically to be a link between the campaign and Union Forum, and to be able to, get some SU resources behind things, and to give insight on like college level stuff to the campaign. But the actual campaign is run by the deputy STEM convener. So that's what you're interested in. That's where you want to run. That's a final faculty assembly, which the deputy has already sent out notice for, I believe, which is on the 28th, I think. Yeah. Deputy, if you'd like to correct me there.
Yeah, it's the 28th. I just sent notice earlier, just to give people a bit of warning, because they might want to run for positions, and everything is happening so fast with these meetings. Just a point, I suppose, to note for maybe some freshers. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but school conveners can only be elected by the reps from that school.
Yes.
With TR 060 junior and senior fresh students, they're eligible to vote for the school conveners that branch off from that, are they?
So generally how it's been run. Now, there's a weird thing with this in that there's actually no written rules for how this is run. It's kind of up to the EC and the STEM convener to decide how that's run. And the way that I have run it, the way I ran it last year and the way I plan to run it again this year, is that only class reps from the school itself can vote. But if you're a rising second year TR 060 and you plan on going into zoology, then you can stand for election to be the natural science convener, but you can't vote for it, because it gets very messy if you get the reps to be able to vote in all the different schools. So
yeah, because they could be saying, oh, I'm going to be studying this, that, or the other, and they're voting in like every election. Yeah.
So it gets very messy. So that's the way that I have run it. That's the way I plan on running it this year. assuming the EC agree with me, but I can't imagine they're going to disagree with me. It is unfortunate there's actually no rules for how it's run for that kind of thing. There's various reasons why there are no rules that are trying to be fixed, but that's the way it is at the moment. The Natural Sciences Convener, do you have your hand up? Do you like to speak to that?
I was going to, but then with the whole I will run it my way, I am the Senate thing, so not anymore.
Okay. Do you have a suggestion for how it could be run? I'm open to suggestions.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, the 2 years that I was the first and second year in science, it was like, to say, like, my example in natural sciences, like, if you were a second year, like, you knew you were going into natural sciences, which is generally quite obvious because you have 100% of a chance of getting into one of the 3 moderatorships if you do that, then you could vote for the NatSci candidates because you technically belong to that constituency already. And it was the same for, like, at the time, obviously, science was one big course, but like science students who knew they wanted to go into chemistry, they could vote for the chemistry convener. Those who knew they wanted to go into like molecular biology would vote for biochemistry and immunology. Caroline, I think, can back me up on that because she voted for biochemistry and immunology for them as well. So, yeah. Like, I don't personally think it would be too messy, to be honest.
You could just get people to register their intent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, with online voting, actually, that would actually make a lot of sense, and that would make it very organized.
Well, as I said, it's essentially up to me to decide. So I'm happy to take recommendations from faculty assembly. So, do we all think, are there any disagreements with doing like that, where people essentially register their intent? This voting is only open to class reps. But if you're a second year class rep and you intend on going into a moderatorship in natural science, you can say, I intend to go into natural science, and then we can register you to vote in that. Do any objections to doing it like that? When are those decisions made formally? On the night. That's not a satisfying answer, but
or is the question when are the decisions for moderatorships? Yeah. So students put their choices in April and they don't find out until the end of June. Tier 060 convener is junior and senior fresh. Reps can vote for that.
And the outgoing Tier 060 convener.
Yes.
Which seems like might seem like a small thing, but considering only like 8 people can vote, having a 9th person voting is actually quite significant. Deadline for choices.
Remember to vote.
Yeah, so that's are there any other questions about how elections are going to happen? That's fine, Liam. Liam, apologise for not unmuting. Okay. Before we move on from council, I'll say one more thing. So there's a little bit of council controversy this week, with us having one on Tuesday and another one on Friday. It's all a bit of a mess, and I encourage all of you to show up to the emergency council tomorrow to make sure we are actually quorate and we can pass the motions, because 2 of them are mine and I would really like those motions to pass. The other thing was, I'm not going to make any specific references to anything, but there was a comment made by someone in council about in reference to the correct way to vote. And I would just like to say, as a member of Union Forum, as a member of council, that you should never feel like you voted the right or the wrong way. You should always say you voted the right way, because you voted the way you thought was right, and never feel like there's a correct way to vote on anything. Obviously, if I'm speaking for a motion, I would like you to vote for that motion. If I'm speaking against a motion, I would like you to vote against that motion. But whatever way you vote is the correct way for you in your role as a representative. So I just wanted to make that comment before we move on. Oh, Mr. President, you would like to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Owen hand to you, President. Just to echo your sentiments as well. So I've since reached out to all members or involved, I suppose, in the group that was related to that comment. And I would like to reiterate that no one should ever feel pressured or under any obligation to feel like their vote is correct or incorrect. That is not the kind of conduct that we allow in the SU. That's not the kind of atmosphere that we want to foster. We want to foster an atmosphere where anyone and everyone can vote whatever way their heart desires, and you should never, ever feel pressured or wrong in the way you vote. I just want to make sure that that sentiment is hammered through so that everyone understands that that is not the environment that we wish to promote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, and we shall now move on to the actual discussion items, even though my report kind of turned into a little bit of discussion there. So first discussion item shall be the school commuter update. So these are the two school commuters that did not speak at last faculty assembly. They're required to give a report at least once per term, and we're trying to keep the agenda for last assembly clear, so it could basically just be elections. So if Jack is here to speak.
I don't think either of them are here. Clara sent apologies just before the meeting.
Okay, so Clara sent apologies, but Jack did not.
No.
Okay. So engineering school near is not reported this faculty assembly or last faculty assembly near as genetics and microbiology. So if you are the reps of either of those schools, make sure you reach out to those conveners that you know what's going on. Next item is from the deputy.
Yahoo! So an update on diversity in STEM. We haven't done a significant amount of new things since the last time I spoke, but we've been working very hard on continuing the good things we're already doing. We've had a few more podcast episodes, and we had a graphic go up the other day about how to change your name in college, which has become a sort of strange focus of diversity in STEM recently. But Luke, our committee member, worked really hard on researching that and putting that together. So very pleased with that. The podcast is doing really well. And yeah, we're just promoting little bits and pieces on social media as we see fit. We had what I believe was our last meeting last week. But yeah, it's been a fantastic time chairing diversity in STEM. And I think given the circumstances, we've done fantastic work, and we've done a lot of good work. And I'm very proud of the committee for that. So if anybody has any questions, I can answer them now, or you can always shoot me an email about it. Oh, and if you want to run, of course, it's a really great opportunity. And I think that some people I've spoken to so far are a little bit apprehensive it's like they want to chair diversity in STEM, but maybe they're not so confident about the deputy role. But diversity in STEM really genuinely is the primary focus of this role. So if you're considering it, I would say absolutely go for it. But yeah, that's me. Thank you.
All right, thank you, deputy. That's actually just related to that. Another thing, the only thing that the STEM greener does related to diversity in STEM is helps the deputy set the application. So that's just another note to say while I'm here. So if you're thinking of applying just to be an ordinary committee member, you don't feel like chairing just yet, but you want to get involved, I suppose make friendly with whoever the STEM convener is and make sure they set up an application process which is nice to you. It is all anonymous, but the questions can be tailored.
Yeah, if anybody applied this year, unless the incoming STEM convener has any different thoughts, having spoken about it with the existing diversity in STEM committee, it's going to be largely the same. So yeah.
Next item. There's a question there from Ashlyn. I suppose I'll give it to the deputy. Judging by the deputy's face, I will say that there are no elections for diversity in STEM committee. It's an appointment process. So basically, there's an application form that will be released at some point. It'll all be up to the next STEM convener and the next deputy to work together on. A form will be released at some point, probably like in August, and then left open until probably the first week of classes to give people a chance to fill it out. Then there's
it's assessed by Sorry, I didn't mean to cut across here. I tried to unmute myself and I ended up closing the Zoom. But yeah, it's assessed by all the relevant PTOs and the chair, and it's currently, and will be by the time the application comes around, is 4 ordinary committee members.
Yeah. And as I said, anonymous assessment. So don't worry about if you have beef with any of the incoming PTOs. Any other questions about diversity instead before we move on? Nope, perfect. Okay, so next discussion item. Okay, so this could be controversial. I'm not entirely sure. We shall find out. So there was a discussion in a faculty exec, and I'm going to talk more about those sorts of discussions later on, because there's certain things that I'm not entirely sure what I'm allowed to say, what I'm not allowed to say. But I gave a representative statement on behalf of the students, so I'm going to tell you what I said. There was a discussion with someone about the idea of lamp tests. So those are like the saliva tests. You spit into a tube. So it's not a nasal swab. These non-invasive spit tests to be mandatory. I think it was twice a week, and like a regular testing, and that would be a condition for returning to impractical classes. Now this conversation happened pre the government's announcement about testing and stuff happening, but this was a discussion that was being had, and the question was asked of me: was this overly burdensome on students to require this test, to require a sort of regular non-invasive test as a condition of coming back to practical classes? And I gave the representation that no, this didn't seem like too great a burden, because it was of my opinion that was similar to PPE requirements. Because it was non-invasive, it seemed like on the par of, it wasn't requiring anyone to get an injection, it wasn't requiring anyone to have anything shoved inside their body. It was just spitting in a tube, and as a screening test, just to try and make things safer. And I gave the representation that I don't think this would be too big of a problem for students. But I gave that representation, and I realized that it might be somewhat controversial to some people, so I figured I'd give a chance for you guys to give your views on that. Because if people are uncomfortable with what we said, we can go back and say, sorry, we talked to students and actually we misrepresented them when we said that. So I said I'd open it up to you guys to give you guys a chance to either agree with me or to disagree with me. And yeah. Julian, Carolyn, physics commuter.
Yeah, thank you. I was just more wondering, they're similar to the test we would do currently on campus, the spit ones.
It's the exact same test.
But that currently requires us to go down and deliver our spit before 10. So would there be an issue in, you'd have to require students to come in much earlier than the lab to do a spit, or bring in their spit from home from before breakfast, and then do it and then wait around for a couple hours? It's mostly the logistics I'm worried about. How early will they have to come in, and do they have to wait, and will there be adequate space to wait in before they go to the lab?
So the president might know more about this than me, but the way it was explained to me was that it wouldn't be you get a test and then you wait for the result and then you go in. It would be that you, like twice a week, like if you're regularly attending labs, then twice a week or once a week you would do this test, and then it would just mean that they'd be, so the lamp testing on campus is not supposed to be a diagnostic test, it's supposed to be a screening test, which means that they're basically trying to catch cases before they turn into big outbreaks. So it's not supposed to be that you get a test, you wait for a result, and if you're clean then you can go into the lab. It's supposed to be basically a monitoring thing, and then if they detect a case, then they know that, okay, whatever that lab group is, their labs will be cancelled for 2 weeks while we send everyone to get a proper nasal swab test. So that's the idea of it. It wouldn't be that you spit into a tube, you wait however many hours it takes, because it does take a good number of hours. So that's how it was explained to me, but I'm going to call upon the president who might know more.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, basically, to build upon that, it would be done, from my understanding, it would be done once or twice a week. I'm not too sure actually of the logistics of like 10 a.m. or that kind of side to it, but it would be done about once or twice a week, just as kind of like a monitoring mechanism, just to make sure. And if a positive result does come back, then that will be escalated to a test on campus in the health center. And at the moment, they're looking to roll this out just for STEM students and then escalate it. So it's very much in development stage at the moment. Probably won't be fully in place this side of term, but will much likely be ramped up and very much well in place for Hillary or Michaelmas term 21. But yeah, that's just kind of a little bit more insight. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to me as well, or just ask right now as well.
Before I call on Julia, I will just say on top of that, and the coming in. Sorry, Julia, but just what the president said there, not coming in before the end of this term. That was actually one of the things that we said in a representation. We said that we were okay with this test coming in, but not before the end of this term, because if it comes in for the start of next term, then that just becomes part of the conditions of college that everyone agrees to. You know, you come to college, you agree to abide by certain sets of rules. But we were not okay with those rules. Like, even though I don't think this is a big thing, I wouldn't mind doing it, we were not okay with these rules changing midterm. Okay, so that was part of the representation that we gave that. If this was going to happen, it was going to have to be when you were starting the academic year, you agree that as a condition of you coming to college, this is something you agree to. We were not okay with those conditions changing mid-year and people potentially, if they're uncomfortable, because it's okay to be uncomfortable with anything. It's okay to say, no, I don't want to split in two. You're allowed to say that. But if you've already agreed to come to college and then have that taken out from you, no matter what reason for it, we said was not okay. Okay, Julia.
Sorry, couldn't find the unmute button there. How would that work for those who have off-campus field work? And I'm not talking about like field trips, because that's not going to happen, but I'm talking about like 1 day long kind of field work somewhere by the sea or in the botanic gardens, down by the Dodder, that kind of stuff.
I don't think that specific question has been answered, but that's an interesting question I'm going to write down. So presumably these field trips aren't like they're a once-ish, twice a term thing. They're not like every week you're going somewhere.
No, I think normally pretty much each module that we have would have something like that. So I'd say that would happen maybe like 4 times a semester each side of the year.
Yeah, as the president just said in chat, it hasn't been thoroughly developed to that extent. But speaking just from like extrapolating from what's been sort of said to us already, because it is still quite an early development stage, I think would more be like if you had a regular lab schedule, which you presumably do have anyway, like for other stuff. It's not like these field work are your only lab engagements. It's not your only in-person stuff.
Wait, so are you saying that?
So it would be that if you have regular labs, you would be getting this test. But if you're having
so those field work wouldn't.
Probably
despite
not,
the fact that they're sitting in like large groups. Or would fieldwork then be cancelled? Because either way, that's not good at all. And that doesn't work for natural sciences at all.
Yeah, there's an interesting question you raise. I will say it was from someone from biological sciences, so very much lab-based stuff. So this insight into fieldwork is an interesting one that probably hasn't been considered yet. So that's something we'll definitely bring forward, because you're right that this model doesn't work for fieldwork. Any other thoughts? Oh, Julian, physics computer.
Yeah, he, him. Oh, it just popped into my head. What's the protocol then if you miss, say, your most recent test? Are you just told you're not going to the lab, or are they, because, with current labs, or it used to be sometimes, you don't have your lab coat and goggles, and depending who was in charge of the lab, you'd either be given some or you'd be told, sorry, you're not coming into the lab. So just what would the protocol be?
Another question we don't have the answer for, but we will definitely pass up because you're right, it's a question that needs an answer. President.
I know in the immediate sense that if you don't have the test, I suppose from the preliminary talks they're having at the moment, if you don't have the test, then you won't be allowed to attend the lab. But that would just be on a once-off instance because the test hasn't been confirmed yet. But that is a very good question. That is something that we will follow up on and try and get an answer to it, because there's obviously a lot more to the question that you've just answered. But that's just kind of the immediate preliminary conversations. But yeah, we'll follow up with that. Thank you.
Okay. I know that the person kind of leading this project in a way, that would be the way that they would want it to be run, but I don't think there's that much appetite amongst the wider college for it to be run like that. And definitely the SU would be fairly hesitant to put our support behind something that heavy-handed, even though it is sort of public protection or personal protection. At that kind of heavy-handed approach, the SU will always be very, very hesitant to put our support behind. Any other thoughts from anyone? No? Okay, cool. Okay, so this is probably going to be the longest discussion because I imagine a lot of people will probably have questions. So before I actually talk on this, I'm going to say something that I left out of the slides, but I put in the agenda. So this will be the last thing we talk about. So lab coat resale scheme. This is on the agenda. I just left out of the slides by accident. So I'm not sure if any of you will recall, but I have said many times throughout the year, and I remember it was one of the very first meetings I had with the education officer, that the SU would not be able to run a lab coat resale scheme or lab coat borrow scheme or anything like that because of various reasons. And I'm here to very happily admit that I was wrong, that the education officer is very, very good at her job, and we have actually secured funding to start this scheme. So starting next semester, there will be a scheme with exact logistics still being worked out, but we have the funding for it. So the first funding round, we've got enough for, I think it was 30 lab coats, and we're also obviously going to supplement that a little bit on our own. So the idea is that graduating students or students that no longer need their lab coat, as long as the lab coat is in good nick, the SU will buy it back for €15, and then we will launder it and stock it in the SU Hamilton shop as a used lab coat for €20. So the €5 is basically to cover the laundrette, not the laundrette, the laundering of the lab coat to make sure it's all clean and stuff. So the SU isn't really making a profit; it's pretty much at cost. So we've got the funding to do this for the first year, and the reason even though we obviously have stock in the shop and we even sell lab coats, the reason we needed funding is because it's a little bit of financial risk for the SU to do this, because just various reasons. There's a little bit of financial risk in doing this. So we got the funding to kind of cover ourselves on that front, and also as kind of like a symbolic support from the college. And we're getting like actual support from the college as well, because to get the funding we obviously had to develop a plan to the point where the college was like, yeah, this is good. And then once we kind of got them to sign off and saying it was good, then that really opens the door to get us going on a larger scale going on. So it's going to be a fairly limited trial this year, probably, as I said, 30-ish coats. And then the idea is that hopefully we will very quickly take in the full stock of 30 this year, and we'll have very high engagement with the scheme, and then we'll be able to say, okay, we can take a larger financial risk next year, buy more coats off students, wash them and resell them for 20 odd euro, which is obviously significantly less than they usually cost, and means that lab coats aren't going to waste, and we're recycling and being good for the environment. So exact plans coming. If you go on so we got the funding through the I can share my screen. So we got the funding through this uni eco sort of college thing. So we're one of 5. Let's say 5. I think it's 5. One of 5 Trinity groups to get funded. There's various other things got funded around different colleges. This is ours. If you want to see our full pitch, very creatively named Student Lab Coat Research Service. So if you want to see the full details of what we pitched to get our funding, that's all up there. So that was myself and the education officer, and this is just me sort of publicly saying that I said it many times that we could never do this, and Megan O'Connor refused to believe me, and she was correct because I was wrong, and I'm very happy to be wrong because that is coming, and that's a very good thing that's coming. Okay, so now let's move on to the final discussion item, which will probably be not going to be using Trinity Laundry though. So we put in, so for the funding call, sorry, that was a question from Zoe in the chat, Zoe Cummins. In the funding call, we said we were going to use a commercial, there's jokes being made about the fact that my underwear got stolen. That's going to be very confusing to various people, and I'm just not going to explain it. So in our funding proposal, we put in that we were going to get it commercially laundered, and we kind of put that in just so we'd have a cost on the proposal, to be perfectly honest with you. How that specifically will work is not set in stone. Maybe we will wash it ourselves. It's more likely we will be sending them off for commercial reasons, for commercial cleaning. Even though it'll be more expensive in money, it's logistically easier because getting personnel in the SU to wash these coats and sort of bring them over to the laundrette and to sort of like that's a kind of associated cost. It's kind of hard to quantify, and it was just logistically easier if we can just in the proposal we kind of explained exactly how this would work logistically. Of like all the lab coats arrive in the SU, we just put them to a bag, send them off to a commercial laundrette, they wash them, send them back folded, and they're ready to sell. And it was kind of worked out that on balance of everything, it probably was cheaper. It was more cost effective for us to do that than for us to say we were going to wash it ourselves in a Trinity Laundry, people stealing underwear aside. But that is the reason that we said we were going to use a commercial solution. As I said, all of this is still kind of, the exact logistics is still all kind of under development. Any other questions about the lab coat resale scheme? No, okay, cool. So this is going to be the last discussion item, and hopefully this will answer some questions and we'll all get to go home. So this is something that came up at a engagement open forum at the start of February, and someone was asking, many people were asking questions about what university council or board or faculty executive are and what it is us representatives do on those bodies and why we do it the way that we do it. And it's something that there's never really an opportunity to explain unless you kind of just have a private conversation with us, which obviously isn't that easy in COVID times. But it's never really explained to you guys as reps or students, whoever's here in this call, why we do our work the way we do it. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to explain some of why we do the work we do, and for you guys to ask questions. And maybe you'll ask a question that makes us change the way we work. But so I can only speak to University Council and Faculty Exec because those are the two bodies I sit on. The president is here, who obviously sits on the University Board. I'm not sure if he wants to talk about that. I'm sure the points I make of the University Council will be very same. But basically, the University Council, if you don't know what it is the top academic decision maker of the college. So everything like mitigation, everything from mitigation measures to just approving the renewal of lecturer contracts, everything to do with academics eventually comes to University Council. This is the top decision-making body, and it has a convention, not just a convention, it's laid down in statutes that everything that happens at University Council is confidential, which means that even though we can see the agenda ahead of time and I'll often ask kind of specific questions leading to me trying to get representation on different issues before University Council. I am by statute not allowed to tell you what's on the agenda, and I am by statute not allowed to tell you what happened at the meeting. There is an exception to this, which is that we can talk about anything the provost talks about. And the convention here is that about a month after council happens, the provost will publish the agenda and the minutes of the previous meeting online, and then that deems to have him talked about the entire meeting, and then we are released from confidentiality and we can talk about most of the agenda. Now, the reason I say most of the agenda is there are still a lot of the most interesting things have a further confidentiality bind on them. So there are, if you look at the agenda, let's pull up the agenda for a meeting of the University Council. So TCD University Council. My internet connection is very slow because I'm on a Zoom call. Let's pull this up. And these are all publicly available. So let's go agenda for 10th March. So you can see the last one that's available is agenda 10th March. So I can tell you that these things happened. I'm now released from confidentiality. I can tell you these things happened. And that's because it's public information, these things happened. But I am not allowed to talk about what any of these things are until the minutes are released. So I can say that we discussed the revised quality policy statement, but I'm not allowed to tell you what we talked about it. I'm not allowed to tell you that we discussed government legislative proposals regarding governance of Irish higher education institutions, but I'm not allowed to tell you what was talked about there. And once the minutes are released, you'll see here, circular for council members only. Generally, even after the minutes are released, I probably am not allowed to talk about this. I say probably because there's lots of weird exemptions. So each of these items is submitted by what's called a member of the executive officers group, called EOG. And if the member of EOG releases that item, then we can talk about it. So there's all these different layers of confidentiality, what we are and aren't allowed to talk about. And people have asked questions in the past and gotten annoyed about, well, us respecting this confidentiality is doing a disrespect to students, because it means that we're letting decisions happen behind closed doors. And it's very similar for faculty exec. So a lot of the points are kind of mirrored. But we as student representatives on these committees, it's in students' interest for us to respect this confidentiality, because it means that yes, decisions are happening behind closed doors, but it means that we can be on the right side of the door. Because even though we are legally required to have representation on these different bodies by different things, and statutes were required to be on these bodies, it's very, very easy for the college to make a decision outside of these committees and kind of bring a pre-made decision to these committees if they want to. If they wanted to make sure students had no input on anything, they could. But because we respect confidentiality and we play the game they wanted played, we can get a lot more done than if we took this kind of stance of like, we're not going to respect confidentiality. Anything you tell us, we're going to tell students. Because if we did that, we'd stop being told things. So this is the work we do, and a lot of decisions that happen in University Council, as I say, do happen pre-University Council. But us being a respected part of the process means that we can be involved in those, pre-council meetings. More so the education officer than the faculty conveners, but say anything that's coming up through faculty exec, I have much more influence on what happens at the faculty exec level, because generally the lower you go, the more you can change things, and as it goes higher up and higher up, you stop having that much material ability to change things. But us being respected at the high level means that we get to make input at the lower levels. So it is a little bit of a political game that we play as student reps. It's very annoying to play. I don't like playing it, but it is unfortunately the best way of getting things done a lot of the time. So I thought I'd say all of that and then give you guys an opportunity as reps to ask questions about how any of this happens, right? How any of this works, because we don't really get an opportunity all that much to talk about this sort of stuff. So I thought I'd give an opportunity to ask these questions. There was a whole like 5-10 minute rant at the open forum about this, and you guys are just silent. I love it.
Those students weren't from this faculty, maybe that's why.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the students that were raising their voice at that were from arts, I do believe, but I thought it might translate a little bit. President, would you like to concur that this what I said about council is the same thing about pretty much every other body in Trinity?
Yeah, the only difference really between council and board, bar the, I suppose, academic aspect of council, because the minutes from council and basically the minutes from any other, I suppose, high level meeting or meeting body that kind of finishes off its line of communication goes to board then for approval in some capacity. But yeah, the confidentiality still stands, and the line that we have to walk between not spilling the beans on anything, keeping in our place, but also representing students is also still there, because if we disclose or leak any information, then we lose the hand of cooperation or collaboration rather. But yeah, board is anything from again, renewal of staff contracts to the naming of T-Tech came up. We had a 30-minute debate once about naming a new campus, funding, talking about how much money is going into different capital projects, staff welfare, student welfare, equality, diversity, inclusivity. There's a whole multitude of things that are discussed at board. And generally speaking, even though board is the like a executive meeting of officers, like it's kind of where everything stops. It's where the book stops really. It's impossible to change anything at board, or near impossible, because things have gone through so many levels of fact checking and different committees and different meetings like that, that once it gets to board, it's very, very difficult, not impossible really, I shouldn't say, but it's very difficult to change anything. But it is strange because so much goes to board, and the agendas are often 400 to 500 pages long, and the meetings can go on to 5 hours, which is intense, but very, very interesting though.
Yeah, I've never seen, because if you're still in university council, you get sent the papers for board. So I can't attend board, but I get their agendas, I get their minutes, and any documents attached I get as well. And it's very, very, it's all in one gigantic PDF, and it's very rare it's less than 500 pages. Like the board is literally every single committee in the college has a reporting line, and that reporting line leads to board. So like if the school conveners here or any like class reps that have ever been in your school, like just any random committee in your school, that goes through a line eventually to board. So everything ends up there. It means that you can just read through stuff. I'm trying to find these minutes. It was the last time there's sort of spicy things happening. Sorry, President?
I think it's section D on the agenda from board has just like things that the committee never even look at. I scrolled to the bottom of it once before, and there was the awards, or the students who won awards in medicine were listed in board. So like any like student accolade or achievement in an academic manner also comes to board as well, just to be noted or to be said at board, or even present at board that this happened as part of the Trinity community, all the way then to like retweaking the strategic plan. So it's anything and everything is just mashed into board. It's unbelievable, fascinating, really.
Yeah, I threw up on the screen here the last time there was a, well, the government one was interesting, but as I said, can't really talk about it. The last time there was something interesting that I am allowed to talk about at University Council was the 2021 scholarship examination, and you can even tell just by the way that the minutes are recorded, you can kind of see the formality in it. Like you see down here, the first time I spoke, Mr. G. O'Reilly also recorded his dissent, which means I literally had to say, "Thank you, Provost, I would like to formally record my dissent to this motion." Like that's the way things happen at council. Like this is a very old school committee. But as Owen said, being on it and like being able to play the game, be on the other side of the door, means that we get to see everything. We don't always have time to see everything, but we get to see everything. But yeah, you can go through there. These minutes are public, as I say. They about 2 months after the meeting happens, you can go in and you can see what myself or what the education officer said, if we said anything. But a lot of time we don't actually say anything because the decision was kind of made before, unless we're trying to record, like in the example of this scholarship examinations thing. We knew realistically going into that meeting that decision had been made. We knew realistically that that was going to pass, but we were putting it on the record that we disapproved of it so that the college could never say that students were okay with it. We wanted to make sure that every single student rep formally recorded that we were not okay with it, that the college could never say that students were okay with it. And that was like a very performative function of council. But that is unfortunately what we have to do.
And even as part of showing dissent, if you disagree with something, it might not get recorded because you have to request that it's recorded on the minutes. A great line is, "I would like it to be recorded on the minutes that I formally dissent to this." And that's usually the mechanism that you have to employ. But just because you disagree with something doesn't mean they'll note it.
Yeah, that's fun.
Hilarious.
Little bit of a actually, I see Zoe Cummins in the chat. Zoe Cummins was the undergraduate studies committee representative last year. So Zoe, if you have a microphone, would you like to talk about what that committee is like in terms of student representation and those sort of decisions that happen there?
Yeah, well, the USC, or the Undergraduate Studies Committee, is basically where all undergraduate academic things are discussed. So things like the SCOLs, how that was going to happen over online and COVID and things like that, or approving new modules, new courses, things like that. And it was that thing where if you weren't told how to act, or like Mr. President just said there, if you weren't told to say, "I note that I disagree with this motion," it wouldn't be noted. And so it's that thing, as the chair just said, when it gets to the board, or where it gets to University Council, the decisions are almost made. But it's things like the committee at USC that make those decisions. Because I remember we had the SCOLs discussion, and it was a 45-minute discussion on that one part of that one agenda. So it was very much in depth, and it was that thing where it's all of the directors of undergraduate teaching and learning, and education officer, and a USC student rep that's elected at council, or SU council. So that's a lesser decision-making body, but it still reports back up to UC, University Council, and that's where that gets approved in the board and things like that. So yeah, it's the same structure where you have to keep stum until it's public knowledge what the agenda was in the minutes. So you are a bit on eggshells trying to make sure you're not, saying things you shouldn't be, because when things are leaked, 99% of the time, it's not the student representatives who are leaking it. I remember the strategic plan was leaked a year or two ago, and there was like a shift of blame, or people were like trying to put blame on student representatives. But we're so careful, and we try and be so careful that we don't break these mandates and these statutes. So it's usually always a professor or some academic on the committee who leaks it to UT and TN. So it's that thing, we want to keep them in our good books as much as possible, because like the previous speakers have said, if they don't want you to speak, or they don't want to note down your opinions, they can easily get around that as well.
I know of one time in the last 4 years that it was actually a sabbatical officer that leaked something from board, and I won't name which education officer it was, but it was an education officer, and they even gave the college like 3 hours warning. They emailed the college's public relations office and it was like, "I'm going to leak this, prepare a statement," because that's as Zoe put it, that's the eggshells we walk on, where we know that at some points we do make decision. It's like we need to break confidentiality in this way. Like we often break in smaller ways. Like you'll say something to, like I've done this before, like at the it's good. It was a good while ago. I don't think I can get in trouble for this now. But when like the original COVID plans were being developed, this is like before college even cancelled or anything, and these COVID plans were being developed, and because I was on University Council last year, I kind of knew things ahead of some lower level academics, but I also knew that these academics like were in different committees that could raise dissent in more effective ways. So I kind of leaked different parts of it to them, not necessarily to students, but to members of staff that I knew could cause a ruckus to try and get things done. So we often like slightly bend confidentiality in that way, shape or form, if we think that's the most beneficial way to help students. It's very rare that leaking it to the paper is from us is the most beneficial way. Sometimes we'll goat staff to leak for us. That has happened as well. We're kind of like, I think it'd be good if the papers found out about this. We don't do it ourselves. We just kind of encourage someone else to do it. That has happened before as well. Not this year. I will not blame anyone this year, but I do have the benefit of being here a while, so I know of things done by people who can no longer get in trouble. And I'm sure in a year's time, stuff will come out about this year, but I don't know about it. Or if I did, I wouldn't tell you about it. Okay, any other questions about University Council or faculty exec or board or any other sort of representation structures that the SU might have? This is the time to ask it, because you don't have time in other meetings in council or anything like that. I think it's important that reps know how these things work and know how you're being represented. No, okay, excellent. Well, we might get out of here eventually then. So, second last item on the agenda, questions. If you'd like to ask myself or any of the school conveners or program conveners anything about the work that we do or anything that's going on, now's the time to raise your hand and ask a question. Kula bula. And finally, any other, okay. Question from the chat from Rian, first year CSL rep. Matthew, why are you so good at your job?
I'm not, but thanks. Actually, I suppose on that, can we use this for, I suppose it's AOB now, right? So I can use this for a second. If anyone who's an SCSS class rep who's here and is considering running for a convener, please do get in touch with me before last faculty assembly if you can. There will be handover documents and that kind of stuff done up. I will do that once my thesis is finished. I'm currently very close to graduating, kind of need to get that done. But please do send me a message on Slack or Facebook or email me or whatever, or catch me after this and ask me about the job if you want it. Like it's very much worth. Or if you know someone who's thinking of running or anything like that, like definitely get in touch so I can like quickly go through like what I've done. As with a lot of stuff in the SU, it's kind of a lot about who you are personally, like and how much you want to or are able to take on. There's a lot of room in a role for doing lots of different things. But if you want like a quick rundown of what I've done and how I treat the job, or how I think the job should be done, or otherwise, like please let me know. I think it's really important to kind of get some idea of what you're going into before you do it. It's much easier said than done. Like even as a rep, you can kind of get very quickly lost between committees and all other nonsense that you have to do as a different convener. So yeah, please do reach out and give me a shout. And I'm sure the same goes for all the other conveners as well.
Thank you very much. Julia, Natural Sciences convener.
Yeah, so Matthew kind of beat me to it, but I kind of wanted to say the same thing. If anyone's thinking of running for natural sciences convener position, or if you have any friends who are thinking of running for it, just reach out to me, email, Facebook, like Slack, anything. And the second thing that I wanted to mention was that in 2 weeks, CSOC is having their AGM and we will be electing the new committee. So if you or someone you know is thinking of running for the CSOC committee, you're very, very welcome. Yeah, that is all.
Thank you, Julia. I'll just general note, run for, if you're running for anything in the SU, it's always a good idea to talk to the officer, whether it's a school convener, faculty convener, or PTO. If you're thinking of running even just the slightest, oh, I might think about that, I'd absolutely encourage you to talk. If you want to run from my position, talk to me, or ignore me if you want. It's your prerogative. But I would suggest talking to the person in the position that you are hoping to run for. And do run. If you've got the slightest inkling of running, run. Because it's good crack. It's very stressful, but it's good crack. Liam, SSTP rep.
Hi everyone. Yeah, SSTP class rep. Just a couple of things. First off, for anybody who takes modules with the School of Physics, the JS and SS class reps have been invited to a meeting with David O'Regan, who is the Director of Undergraduate Teaching and Learning. So if anyone has any comments, or he's only invited the JS and SS reps, so if anyone in any other years wants anything raised at that meeting, he's kind of planning on going into a more in-depth discussion, things that wouldn't necessarily come up in a module feedback form, that kind of thing. If anyone has any comments or anything they want raised, either let me or the physics convener, Julian, know before next Tuesday. And then besides that, the MatSoc AGM is being held next Wednesday. The nominations are open at the minute, so I would recommend running for a committee position if you have any interest. Yeah, that's everything. Thanks.
Sorry, I lost you on the mute button for a second there. Thank you, Liam. Rian, JF CSL rep.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Just want to say that NetSoc had a pretty shocking AGM. So we have a whole bunch of roles available. That's amenities officer, people who manage the room, events officer, webmaster, and several ordinary committee members, or GOs, as they're referred to in the society. If you'd like to register your interest, just email support@netsoc.ie. Just bearing in mind that you actually have to be a member of the society. And also, the Grundle Party would like to register its dissent with Matthew not acknowledging how great he is at his job. Thank you.
Caroline, the biochem and immunology convener, made a great point in the chat there. To note that you don't have to be a class rep to run. So tell your class that if they want to run for a school convener or PTO or faculty convener or deputy or whatever, to show up to the relevant meeting. So if they want to run for school convener or for chair of diversity in STEM / deputy STEM convener, tell them to show up to the next one. You can give them the link. This meeting is open to anyone in the faculty, not just class reps. So if anyone that studies anything with STEM, they're allowed to show up, they're allowed to talk, they're allowed to run for things. Even though only class reps can vote, anyone can run. Rory, joint courses convener.
Yes, similar to Liam with School of Physics, School of Engineering is meeting the junior fresh reps if anyone's issues there as well. And then just for Schedule 1, actually, the joint courses convener isn't mentioned anywhere. Just really like to flag that with you.
That was a shockingly large gap. Thank you for flagging that. Pretty much put you down as program convener, I suppose. Yeah, I will deal with that offline. I'll write it down. Any other things to say? Any other business?
Oh, Dan. Remember that thing you sent me about boot camps?
Oh,
for extra labs?
Yes.
Owen Scanlon is completely against that, and he said no way.
Owen Scanlon is disagreeing with the head of his school. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, he told Mike yesterday that he did not want it. And Mike said that because he's more worried about junior soft than anybody else going to senior soft, he said any problems will be dealt with. So I don't know what that means, but I am screwed.
Okay, that's interesting that Owen is so forceful on that. Yeah, that's another
he
thing.
Said, like,
good.
I didn't even bring it up in the meeting yesterday. He just said no way. So
Yeah, that's a thing actually I should have put in my workers report. I've just remembered that I've done that. It's been so long since I've read faculty assembly, I forgot everything I've done. I did sort of get assurances from most of the schools in the faculty, and I communicated, I believe, to each of the individual school commuters which schools I'd gotten assurances from, which ones I hadn't. I'll go back and check, and I can publish that. Which schools had sort of assured me that they're open to the idea. If not, if they're either automatically doing it or they're open to the idea of doing sort of top-up classes for physical lab skills. The general response is most schools think they're doing okay, but if there's genuine concern from students, they will look into, they're open to the idea of running top-up classes, but most schools don't want to do top-up classes unless there's like significant concern, significant interest from students, because it is a lot of work. But I have gotten that assurance from, I'd say about half the schools, and as I said, I talked to conveners, but I'll make that public now. So that's the thing. If you're in a school with wet labs and you're concerned about your lab skills, follow that up with your school convener or myself. President, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Just to give. It came up with President Trump in your that's funny. Just to give my thanks to the STEM convener for all the hard work that you've done on the student space in the Hamilton area. Wrote the proposal, had the proposal given to the provost followed up, and we got it approved, which is the first time the student space has been put into the Hamilton area, not Hamilton building, because it's 5 buildings in one. I learned that recently, into the Hamilton area in a very long time. So my deepest gratitude for you and all the work you've done on that, and also my congratulations to the Deputy STEM convener, who since the last STEM FACAS has been elected to Education Officer. Thank you.
It's interesting that you note that it got approved. I'd actually not even said that much. I just said that there have been positive developments and I wasn't allowed to talk about them. So thank you for being the one to break that, because then you'll get in trouble for saying it. Zoe, you have your hand up.
I'm in trouble with myself.
Yeah, just to go back to what you're talking about for the wet lab top-up classes, how would it, so you say most of the schools are open for having them if they see there's a need for them, but will it be like a month into labs if they've realized, oh, you know, the now SF years don't know how to use Pipette properly? So is that going to be like trying to fix something while it's broken, where we could do it, you know, before? And like, I'm just worried about that, the logistics of it, implementing that, as in when will they figure out that there needs to be top-up classes? Will it be too late, or a bit of a logistical nightmare as it gets later on in the year?
So what we specifically asked for was running them in the summer session. And that's also why we're getting a lot of the pushback, is that lecturers don't want to have teaching things happening during the summer session. And we've also had some back and forth, and I know that some particularly international students, I think Hannah Heskin in particular on Education Committee was sort of inputting on this about when it would be ideal to have them. Yes, Hannah Heskin just put in chat there, reading week first semester. There's a lot of back and forth on when these top-up sessions would have. I think it's better off having them in summer. Like if we can identify now, like if we can look at the curricula and say, okay, there's a skill that will be needed here that they would have normally picked up in first year if they haven't, and try to get that before college starts. But there are, you know, there are other considerations, as like I think the point that was raised at Education Committee was about international students having to come home to Ireland, and obviously there's quarantine concerns with that as well. So there's a lot of specific logistics, which is why we only really looked for, because it was much easier to get it this way, is say like, if we can identify a need, are you open to this idea? And we didn't look for any specifics yet, because the specifics are still so up in the air. So that's why we're just trying to get them to give, just to say that they're open to the idea without any specifics attached. So that's why it sounds kind of non-committal. It's because it kind of had to be, just because of all those problems will have to be worked out. Basically, if we get this to go ahead for a class, those problems would have to be decided for that class. rather than getting any general terms, because every class will have a different layout of international students and Irish students that might have a job, and yeah, there's just all sorts of very messy logistics that would have to be solved if this ever happened.
Can I just make a suggestion for some way I could see could be implemented, and I think the Deputy STEM Commuter is agreeing with what I'm proposing, is that wet labs don't start until teaching week 3 or 4. It's the first week you have just lectures, and then second week they bring the tutorials on, and then the third week bring on labs, and that's for physics, chemistry and biology. I'm not sure for the rest of the schools, but so if you have a lab from Friday 12 to 3, that is blocked out for the first 2 weeks. You don't have anything during those times. So could we use those times to utilize these wet lab top-ups? Because then international students will be here already, because teaching would have started.
Yeah, that seems like a fairly good suggestion as well, because there'd be less pushback from the schools having teaching events like during teaching weeks. Like there'll still be pushback because they are legitimately doing a lot of work. Like the lab techs are doing so much work to try and get the amount of teaching that's happening right now, and it is really hard having these meetings where you're kind of going in and like you can see they're at their breaking point, and you're asking them for more because you guys are concerned, like rightly so, you're concerned for your amount of labs, and it's so tough going into these meetings and be like, I know that you guys are like at your breaking point, but students need these lab skills. So what can we do to like get more lab time without everything falling apart? And like the emotions run high in those meetings. Those are tough meetings, but we are working towards, and they really do care. The lab techs and the academics and the teaching staff when labs, they really do care, and they really do want labs to run. It's just with COVID logistics is difficult.
Actually, to add further to what the chair has just said there about the lab technicians really wanting these to run, I've had a couple of conversations with the provost as well, and a lot of meetings. We've one meeting called TLC, Trinity Living with COVID, not Tummy Loving Care, unfortunately. But at TLC, the provost has actually kicked up havoc about the outcome for students, and really pressing academic staff to find favorable outcomes for students, and mostly in academic senses. Really valuing the quality of the education that you're receiving. So these are conversations that we're having with the provost, and he really is in full agreement that there has to be a solution that's fair and equitable towards the quality of your education, which is, I suppose, worth sharing, because I know a lot of people have this view of the provost, and everyone is entitled to their opinions, and I have had issues with how he's dealt with some things, but it's important that you guys know and understand what we see on our side as well. And I've seen him not berate, but certainly point out the flaws in certain people's plans in front of a whole Zoom room full of people.
Those are the best meetings, when the provost just, because he's just a proper engineer. There's moments where his engineering side comes out, and maybe I'm biased because I am one too, but I always think it's a beautiful moment where he looks at a plan and he's like, but that won't work. And the person presenting it is just absolutely floored, because people don't talk that bluntly outside of engineering. That's how we talk. Like the engineering reps here can assure the rest of you that is how we talk to each other when we're engineers. We did just straight tell each other that won't work. Other people in other disciplines, it seems, aren't prepared for that, and they're never really happy with that happening in a meeting, and it's always very entertaining to watch.
There was even a full report today of like staff well-being, and how the managers can take care of their staff to ensure that they're fully appreciated, looked after, and kind of like don't answer emails out of these hours and do this and do that. And someone from the comms office said, like staff really value being appreciated, and it's important just to say simple things like, thank you, I really appreciate the work you're doing. And the provost just signed off that comment with, right, yes, thank you. What's next? Which that was ironically hilarious, but don't forget to say thank you to people.
He's a funny man. Like I disagree with a lot of his decisions, but he does care about what he does. It's often difficult to see that until you're in a meeting with him, and you see the way he operates. I do disagree with a lot of decisions he's made, but I do believe he is like the interest of staff and students at heart, despite what often ends up happening. Okay, so there's no other business. I shall adjourn this meeting. Thank you all for showing up. See you at the next faculty assembly. Well, hopefully see you all at emergency council tomorrow night, because we're going to make quorum for that one, and we're going to keep quorum the entire time. So yeah, thank you all for showing up. I will see you when I see you. Quorum for FACAS is 35. It's okay. The number was above 35 until everyone started leaving at the end there. We were on exactly 35 for a while there.
Nobody called quorum, so it doesn't count.
Yeah, anyone still in this call, that's a weird thing in the SU. It's actually general, like it's not like a weird SU thing. I shouldn't say that. It's just a weird governance thing. It's the same in pretty much any sort of functional government of any organizational size, in that you assume there's enough people in the meeting until someone asks. There's really interesting formal conventions in the US Senate. They've got weird rules about it. So basically, like you just assume that there's enough people at the meeting until someone asks for a quorum call. So that's why, like, it's more obvious now that we've got Zoom and we've got like the live number of people on the call. But by the way, this meeting's over. This is just having a chat now. I'm going to stop the recording if I can figure